Hi, Jenny Welch again, and here's the final instalment of the Centurion story. Roman floggings were brutal, so much so that sometimes the victims died before the crucifixion. The flogging was done with a multi-stranded leather whip. On the ends of the whips were tied bits of bone and lead. The whip would be struck against the bare back of the accused. The Jews had a limit of 40 lashes, and so would only count to 39 lest they make a mistake. We Romans had no limit. I thought to myself, surely now he'll make his move. But he didn't. There was no rescue party. I could do nothing now but my job. All I could do was watch as my man scourged him something fierce. His flesh was ripped apart. Afterward, weakened by the blows, Jesus was further mocked by the soldiers. They stripped him of his clothing and put the purple robe back on him. They put a crown of thorns upon his head and a staff in his right hand and mocked him. "Hail, King of the Jews! Hail, King of the Jews!" And then I watched as one of the soldiers took the staff from him and struck him again and again upon the head, pressing the thorns further into his scalp, the blood trickling down his face. They spat on him, they struck him in the face, and then they took him back to Pilate. Pilate brought him out before the people. "Behold the man! Behold your king!" hoping that the flogging would appease them. Then he asked whom he should release, for he was allowed during the Passover to release a prisoner to the crowd. "Who should I release? Barabbas, a murderer, or Christ?" And with one voice the people answered, "Release Barabbas." "And what about Jesus? What should I do with him?" And the crowds went crazy, yelling, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" They pulled the robe off Jesus and put his own clothes back on him. When they pulled the robe away, the wounds were reopened as the robe had stuck to the already dried blood. They led him away to be crucified along the way of sorrow and suffering. The time was the 3rd hour, about 9 a.m. on Friday morning. Jesus was weakened by the flogging. He couldn't carry the crossbeam, which weighed about 30 to 40 pounds, for the cross he would be crucified upon. A man named Simon was conscripted to carry it. The crowds went crazy. Women were following, wailing, mourning. We took him to Golgotha, the place of the skull. Golgotha is Aramaic for skull. The Latin word for skull is Calvaria, thus the name of the place, Calvary. We Romans crucified the basest of criminals, slaves, and enemies of Rome. Crucifixions were cruel. We would take heavy, wrought iron nails and drive them through the victim's wrists onto the crossbeam and the feet onto the vertical beam. And then we would lift the victim up so that the weight caused breathing difficulties. To ease the pain, the victims would lift with their feet, easing breathing but bringing great agony to the feet. Sometimes the pain would prolong for days. I was amazed as I heard Jesus say, as they drove the nails into his wrists and heels, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." The people, the chief priests and rulers, and the teachers of the law mocked him. They heaped insults upon him and spat upon him. 2 rebels, insurrectionists, charged with treason against Rome, were also crucified with him, one on each side, and they heaped insults upon him. "Save yourself if you are the Son of God," the crowds mocked. One of the criminals later repented. "This man has done nothing wrong." And I thought as I sat under the cross, yes, he is right. "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom," the criminal said. And Jesus answered, "I tell you the truth, today you will be with me in paradise." And then Jesus looked at me, and I thought as I stared at him, I want to be in paradise too. The women were wailing. There were 4 of them nearby, one of them being his mother Mary, and next to her was a disciple whom Jesus seemed to have loved very much. And when he saw them both, he said, "Woman, behold your son," and then to the disciple, "Behold your mother." And I thought to myself, incredible, even in the midst of dying on the cross, in a time of intense physical pain and mental anguish, this Jesus was thinking of others. And the words came back to my mind, "Father, forgive them, they know not what they do." Still in control, still strong, still ministering and thinking of others. 3 hours had passed. It was noon on that Friday. For the next 3 hours it was completely dark. What was happening? At the 9th hour, about 3 p.m, after hanging on that cross for 6 hours, he cried, "Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani." My God, why have you forsaken me?" Such anguish, such pain. as if he were experiencing hell, as if all the sins of the world were placed upon him. I later learned that at this moment his Father's face was turned away from him. This Jesus, who from all eternity knew nothing but perfect, infinite, joyful bliss and communion with his Father, and now his Father had turned his face away from his Son. He who knew no sin had become sin in our place. I tried to close my ears. I tried to close my eyes. And then it stopped. I looked at him. He seemed tired, exhausted. "I am thirsty," he said. They gave him wine mixed with gall, a bitter sour vinegar, to mock him and to keep him revived to prolong the suffering. Afterward, Jesus said, "It is finished." What is finished? I wondered. He seemed to be speaking about something more than his life. And then in a loud voice he cried out, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." He didn't go out weak. As was apparent by his voice, he was still strong. And there he was still in control, as if he were waiting for all things to be fulfilled before he gave up his life, not anyone taking it from him. He breathed his last. The curtain in the temple, which separated the holy place from the most holy place, was torn in two from top to bottom. There was a big earthquake. Rocks split open. Tombs were broken open. Later, bodies of many holy people who would die would rise to life and walk through the city. I was terrified. I thought the end of the world had come. And I looked up at this man who days before was entering the city with palm branches waving, a man now at peace, as if he had a smile upon his lips. Such beauty, such love. And I praised God and then exclaimed, "Surely this was a righteous man. Surely he was the Son of God." The Sabbath was quickly approaching that Friday afternoon. The Jews didn't want the bodies left on the crosses. Pilate gave them permission to remove them. Before taking Jesus down, one of the men took a spear before I could stop him and pierced it through Jesus' side. To the end, even while he was dead, brutality and cruelty were shown him. The blood flowed like crazy, some splattering upon my forehead. Lots of water flowed as well. I was tired, exhausted. I wiped the blood with my hand and looked at it, shaking my head as I walked away to let my men do their job, thinking to myself, here was one, fully man and fully God, who loves the world so much so as to die on an old, rugged cross.